Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. My name is Dr. Stephen Kirch. I'm the creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and business process for scale. Every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Today, my guest is Megan Pastrana. She's the CEO and managing attorney of Immigration for Couples. And today we'll be discussing their special sauce and their work in the world. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your podcast. I'm honored to be here with you today.
Well, thanks again so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know. So, Immigration for Couples, that's kind of unique in and of itself. But I'd love to hear, before we get into that, I'd love to hear the story of how you got here.
Yeah, it is very unique. It's a very niche area of immigration law, and I love what I do, and so does everybody on the team. Our story of how we got here and the creation of Immigration for Couples, I like to explain it kind of when I look back on my life. I just see all of these pieces or things that have happened in life, lessons or people that I've met, experiences that I had is puzzle pieces. And you just keep putting the puzzle pieces together and you start to see more and more of that vision. And so there's quite a few different puzzle pieces. And one of them was I had studied abroad. I speak English and Spanish. I love traveling. I love other cultures. I love learning about and working with people all over the world. But I know the biggest puzzle piece, the most important piece of the puzzle for the creation of Immigration for Couples is my own personal immigration journey with my husband, Carlos, who is from Mexico. We've been together for over a decade. Actually, yeah, we've been married for almost a decade, and we've been together for over a decade. And we had our own personal story of immigration and navigating through that process. Along with the other puzzle pieces in my life, I realized that going to law school and becoming an immigration attorney was my calling. And so that's kind of like a 30,000-foot view, but really that was the catalyst, my own personal experience.
Yeah. And it's true in coaching, and I'm sure it's true in many other professions that you are best able to serve that former version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And having gone through this. So tell me what it's like for couples that want to immigrate to the U.S. I mean, I've seen the movies, right? But I'm guessing there's probably some difference between the way Hollywood tells it and what happens in real life.
Yeah, Hollywood, unfortunately. Yeah, I know people's idea of immigration is what they see. One of the most famous examples, I think most people have seen, is the Proposal movie with Sandra Bullock. Have you seen that?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that for a lot of people, that's a reference point. And in that movie, it shows like how they meet and then everything is just goes so quickly. It makes it seem like it's like going and getting a driver's license in a way. I know there's some places out there that will compare it to that, but really the reality for anybody who's going through the immigration process is a very complex bureaucratic system. You're having to prove to immigration that you have a real relationship. It's a very intimate process. I mean, for most of us, having a relationship and getting to know someone, that's us. That's our own personal thing that stays private. Sure, friends and family partake and can see our relationship grow, but we're talking about immigration wanting to see like your text messages and your joint bank account statements, and it can feel invasive. You are on the hot seat. You know you love this person, and now you have to go through this hurdle of proving it to immigration. There's an interview. In most cases, there's an interview involved, and it's a very long process. So they show Sandra Bullock, and she's going through the process like quickly. She goes in that same day, and she's like, "I want a fiance visa," and then they stamp her paper, and it's not like that. And especially after COVID, I think the thing that's most shocking for people is that there can be wait times in excess of 1.5 to 2 years for couples to be able to complete the process. And we're talking about people who are oftentimes living in 2 separate countries. Um, it's just it's a lot. There's a lot of things that people don't realize.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to think, how would I prove that I love my wife? I mean, other than the fact that we've been married for 42 years. How would you, how do you prove it? I mean, obviously they have to infer things from statements that you make, statements that your partner makes.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we actually, our firm actually created this free resource guide too on how to prove your relationship, because it's a fantastic question, and it does seem like I love this person, we got married, like, why, seriously, what more do you need?
Yeah, right.
And
What more is there?
that's the part where it becomes invasive. I mean, we're talking, and so we kind of break relationship to evidence down and immigration into a few different categories. So people oftentimes think about the sentimental evidence, right? The photos we have together, letters we might write to each other, friends and family who can attest to us having a real relationship. And so that evidence is actually considered by immigration to be lower level evidence. It gets given lower weight. Immigration is also looking for financial ties. They call it commingling of finances. They have a very old-fashioned way of looking at couples relationships, very cookie cutter. Like, you
No.
have to kind of fit into this into a certain box of having, joint bank account statements and joint bills, and if you had a joint mortgage, if you have children together. So there's different categories of evidence. What we do when we work with couples is, yes, immigration has this cookie cutter mold of what they're looking for, but we have a lot of couples who ultimately decide for various reasons that they want to handle their finances differently. Maybe they'll have a joint account, but then they want to also maintain some kind of independence, and have separate accounts as well. So we really start by getting to know that couple, and we create a very customized list of evidence for every couple that we work with, so we can prove their relationship to immigration. So it's a very intricate, meticulous process to have to prove to immigration that you were really in love and not just trying to get an immigration benefit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and in fact, my wife and I had separate bank accounts for many years. We eventually merged them, but it was, you know, we were working for different employers and we had all this stuff already set up, and why did we need to merge that? Right. It wasn't, she paid some bills out of her account and I paid some out of mine, and we'd swap money back and forth as we needed to. But yeah, having a joint bank account didn't prove that we cared for each other.
No, and it's
That's
it's really interesting, and I'm so, and I always talk about the joint bank account because I know that there's couples who will try to do their own case innocently, thinking, well, I read online we should have a joint bank account, so they open a joint bank account and they kind of go through the motions. But if your intention and you're not really using that account, then you start to raise red flags. And we've actually seen people who've tried on their own and they really have a real relationship, but then they get themselves caught up in immigration investigating them, thinking they're trying to manufacture evidence. So it's a delicate
sure,
balance.
sure. Yeah. Fascinating yeah, to think about, well, gee, how would I prove it? So,
Mhm.
obviously you have a very specific niche. Um, so normally I ask people, well, what makes you unique? I think maybe your niche makes you unique, but are there other things that make your firm unique within maybe the niche of immigration? Or
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually part of my story, that the firm has been in existence for over a decade. But I actually, when I became the sole owner and the CEO of the firm in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, I knew my calling was to work with just couples. And I made a decision, that line in the sand of, I want to help just couples, and the firm previously was more of a boutique firm, or it ran the gamut of immigration. Typically, when you think of immigration attorneys, you're thinking like asylum and cancellation of removal, like humanitarian based and family all together.
Mhm.
But that was just really my passion to work with just couples, and so that's when we rebranded and named the firm, Immigration for Couples. Um, and frankly, what makes our firm unique, we're the only firm in the country that's dedicated to this exclusive niche area. But beyond that, our special sauce, as you and I have talked about previously, is really that we serve as guides for our couples. Yes, we are legal advocates, but we provide a holistic service. And by that I mean, we value the couple, we value people over transactions. And so we don't look at our job as being form fillers. We're not just here to fill out forms and slap an application together. We really see ourselves as guides to help the couples understand where we're at and where we're going, and walking them through exactly what you and I were just talking about joint bank statements and things like that. Having conversations, sometimes we have conversations with couples about finances and they haven't really had themselves, and so then we give them the spaciousness to go and to work out what do they want for their financial situation, so then we can make sure we are fitting into what immigration is looking for, and helping them to be them, helping to uplift their union, helping to take that pressure. Our special sauce is really helping to take that pressure off of their relationship. So we will be in the driver's seat of taking care of their application so they can focus on nourishing their union. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters, and that's why they're doing the process. So
Right. You want to get through the process without destroying the relationship that made the process necessary or possible, right? Yes.
yeah, and it's sad. It happens. It happens a lot, where I call it the third wheel effect, and for couples who are going through the immigration process, that they start to become, especially for couples who maybe do the case on their own, they start to really become hyper focused on this immigration case, this third wheel. They're ruminating about it, they're checking it, and they forget about getting to know that person in front of them.
Or continuing to build the relationship, right? I mean, it's
Exactly.
as you know, having been in a relationship for a decade now, right? That it's not a once and done thing, right? It's got to be ongoing,
Yeah.
and if you have something that gets in the way of that, you have to be ultra focused on making sure that other doesn't go away in the process, right? That's I think that's really insightful.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's in just having, we've helped thousands of couples, and it's always heartbreaking to see people who just, don't make it through the long wait, or, even after the process is over, if they end up having to get a divorce, it's hard. And they, a lot of times, will say, yeah. And the couples who make it through, it's on both sides. They will both say, this is a very challenging process, and it will really make or break your relationship. It will either be the thing that will make you come out the other side even more resilient individually and as a couple, or not.
it's sort of like hanging wallpaper.
Yeah, that's a good
I
parallel.
I have heard a number of couples who say this is a real test of a marriage, is hanging wallpaper together.
Yeah, doing any housework
Yeah,
together.
all
Uh,
of that, redecorating, whatever. Yeah, it's gonna be. But
yeah, I think that's a pretty good, yeah, a good parallel. And I
uh,
and I know that there's certain things, like certain house things, that if my husband's working on it, I prefer to. He always lets me know when he's doing that. So if he needs to be upset about anything, I don't have to be present to partake in those festivities. Something.
yeah, yeah. Um, so what's the process for you said it can take 18 months to 2 years to wait in queue kind of thing, but what are the major milestones or steps in this process? I mean, I have obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but I don't know. I was born here, my wife was born here, so in the States, so we didn't have to go through any of this.
Yeah,
um
I mean, it's a labyrinth, and there are a couple different paths that a couple can take. It depends whether or not they're married already or if they're engaged. It also depends on where the immigrant happens to be living. So
Of course.
there are situations where, a couple will meet when they're in university or
Hmm.
here in the States. And, one person might be on a student visa. And then there would be a process that's called adjustment of status. And they complete that process here in the States. Or there's couples that, that they'll meet while the other person is studying abroad. Or we have a lot of individuals who are in the military or, expats who are working at companies abroad, and they either meet someone, life continues on while you're having your career, and you
Sure.
meet someone and fall in love. And then there would be a fiance visa or a spouse visa process that's completed outside of the US at a US embassy or consulate. But in general, to answer your question, giving you kind of like a 10,000 or 20,000 foot view, in general, the process involves what's called a petition. So that's the part where you have to show you're legally married and that you have a real relationship based on love and not just to receive an immigration benefit. It also includes basically an application for the person to receive their green card. So everybody hears green card, but it's lawful permanent residency status. And then there's a whole other part of that application that involves something called an affidavit of support. And the person who is bringing their fiance or spouse has to provide taxes for the past 3 years, a lot of personal financial information to show that this person, that they will be supported financially, that they won't become a burden. So like I said, that's like a 20,000,
Okay.
30,000 foot view of the process. But each step in the process has different wait times, and so it's really just going through a flurry of different paperwork, and then a long wait, and a flurry of paperwork, and a long wait. So
Oh, sounds delightful. Uh, but so you mentioned it specifically for couples. Do you not handle children? What happens if the couple has been married for long enough that they have kids?
yeah.
Will you take a couple like that as well, or
That's
how
a
does
really
that?
great, yeah, that's a really great question. And so when we talk about couple-based immigration, it's really that family unit. And a lot of times there will, with especially with the process being so long, we have a lot of couples that will have children that are born in that
That could happen.
process.
Yes, in 18 months or 2 years, it could happen,
Yep.
couldn't it?
That would be the timeline. And so we help with that. They're depending on if the couple is married or where the child happens to be born and things like that. There's something called a consular report of birth abroad, or sometimes if the children are older and they're stepchildren, then we can do the process for the entire family to bring the family at once. So yes, and we actually, a lot of times couples will want to also bring parents. That's a longer process, and typically that's something that we would assist with in the future if they're wanting to bring parents. But in general, we're working with the couple and their children. Yeah.
And since we're talking about immigration into the United States, there are no state differences, are there?
Yeah. So it's all federal. Immigration
Okay,
is all federal law. And there wouldn't be differences in terms of the states, but I think it's important to note that uh, we're talking about U.S. embassies and consulates will be part of some of the different,
sure.
depending on the type of process. And so that would be a U.S. embassy or consulate, in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, or Madrid, Spain, Rome, Italy. So or even like in Dubai and things like that. Each one of those U.S. embassies and consulates has their own kind of policies and procedures. It's
Hmm.
still immigration law, but we do have nuances that come up, overlap with other laws of other countries in terms of document issuance. And sometimes that same thing can happen with states in terms of how marriage licenses and things like that, eligibility for marriage in those states, for example.
Okay,
So there's a little nuance. There's a lot of overlap, just to be clear, but
okay.
it's federal law.
Yeah, well, yeah, was sure it was federal law, but I just wanted to make sure, because I know, I mean, and some states are dealing with the immigration problem
In a different way.
in a different way than other states, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the question
and
makes perfect sense. Yeah, that's a lot of people will ask that, and there are nuances and overlap. But yeah.
So do you see any big changes on the horizon for immigration law, or how all of this will play out for couples? Are you anticipating any of that, or do you not worry about it until it's actually law?
So the thing with immigration is the Immigration and Nationality Act is a very long, book, a list of all of the eligibility requirements and problems a person can have and whether or not they can overcome. That Immigration and Nationality Act, just like a lot of laws in the U.S., aren't terribly easily changed because people have not to get into politics, but to get into
No.
politics have to agree. And
Yes.
so it's a very, our system was set up in a way for change to be something that happens slowly.
Mm-hmm.
But with these wait times, so for couples who are going through this process, I want to take you back a little bit to give you some context of something that I'm hopeful. I tend to be an optimistic, positive person, that I'm hopeful will change. But pre-2020, pre-COVID, USCIS, immigration, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, was already having issues with government funding. They were having issues with not having enough money, not being able to have enough staff. They were already having issues with wait times. Then COVID happens. A lot of embassies and consulates got closed while we were waiting like the rest of like all of the world, we were waiting. So it created further backlogs. There were also things with the prior administration where they decided to close even more immigration offices abroad. And some of those decisions from the prior administration had a ripple effect on wait times.
Sure.
So a process that before 2020, a fiance visa case, it would take about 5 to 6 months for the couple to be together in the States. A spouse visa, still under a year. Now we're talking about a process it's almost doubled, if not tripled, in its wait time in most cases. So you're talking about a couple having to live apart. So these wait times are just outrageous. And frankly, it's not what this immigration system, it wasn't set up to make it impossible for a US citizen to be with their spouse and children or their fiance. And so I'm hopeful. Immigration says that they are making changes in terms of hiring more consular officers, hiring more immigration officers, and that they're trying to find ways to shorten these wait times. But that's really what I'm hopeful, that they continue to make progress in that direction. Our firm is always advocating. We're always contacting congressional representatives. We go to Washington, D.C. We've gone to Washington, D.C. in past years with American Immigration Lawyers Association, helping our representatives, Congress and Senate, to understand the impact that these wait times and the system is having on families. So I'm hopeful that that's something that will change and needs to change. And we're always encouraging couples who are going through the process, our clients or not, reach out to your congressional representatives, because people just don't understand that this is happening. And it's, and I hear our clients who are United States citizens saying, I feel like the government doesn't want me to be with my family. And so letting your representatives know these are changes that just have to happen. So yeah.
So yeah, that's great. I think, folks listening, if you have a passion for this topic, make sure that you let your representatives, senators know about what's going on and these really unfair wait times. Again, that's not the purpose of these laws. The laws are there to make sure that people don't get away with stuff, but not to prevent 18 months, 2 years living apart. My wife and I did, when I was finishing my PhD, my wife had to leave and go take the job that she had accepted, several months earlier. And we were separated for 5 months. And this is in the mid 80s. So we didn't have cell phones, right? We our phone bills were, $200 a month, and $1985, right? That was a lot of money, especially since I was a student and not really making any money. But 18 months, 2 years living apart. Wow.
Yeah. It's rough. And I do want to, a part of our approach, part of our firm culture, and part of what we do with our clients is we always want to help clients feel empowered. And so I say all of this so people understand the reality of the situation, but I never want it to be something that comes across where we slip into a victim mode, because
Right.
I think you understand that, but I always like to share that yes, it's a long wait, and yes, it's frustrating. But instead of sitting in this is the mindset of this is unfair and this sucks and this is horrible, do take the action you can, let your senators and congressional representatives know, but also simultaneously look at this as an opportunity for you and your partner, be it fiance or spouse, can really grow in your union. And a lot of our couples, like you said, with phones, but a lot of people will, FaceTime or Zoom, or when you are together, something I like to do, if when I was going through university, or if my husband and I are apart, we like to write notes for each other and put it, in suitcases or different places so the other person will find it. Find creative ways, to connect with your partner. And even like on Valentine's Day, I know we had talked about, for those who have to be apart, have a Zoom dinner and come up with some questions of things you would like to know even more about this other person in your life, and connect emotionally. So don't let it allow you to slip into a victim mode. That's my long
Oh,
rant about that. I just
Megan, that's so wonderful. Every opportunity, I firmly believe this, every opportunity can be turned into a gift.
I can.
There's a gift there in every situation, in every, even in trials like this,
Hmm.
that you can, and I love the fact that you are encouraging that. Sometimes it's hard to find the gift,
Hmm.
but it's there if we look, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But so, and the pressure, you've heard that saying, pressure can burst pipes or make diamonds. I always give them that too. That's a really
oh,
good quote to think about. Like, what experience do you want? So,
yeah. So, do you have anything special going on right now? Special offers for couples that are starting
yeah,
out on their journey?
I am big on, we rather, not just myself, but our entire team at Immigration for Couples, we know knowledge is power. And so we actually have a very robust free resource center, where there's this K1 fiance visa and CR1 spouse visa, and it starts to feel a little bit like you're lost in an alphabet soup.
Oh, jeez.
So this resource center is a really great way for couples who just feel overwhelmed to kind of get their bearings straight and to understand where do you start and what are potential options that are available. And then that resource center also includes, we have a podcast, Navigating Love and Immigration, and that's that holistic support that we're talking about. I have a lot of guests, therapists, relationship experts. I share my own story in more detail and help couples really embrace that, the silver lining and the gift that can be part of their immigration journey. So that's all in our immigration for couples.com and our resource center. So
Great. Well, we'll make sure that that's in the show notes for everybody. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, needed some help um, figuring out how to navigate all of this, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
yeah, so on our website, immigrationforcouples.com, we have a self-scheduling link there.
Okay.
And then also, the firm, that's usually how people will go about it, is because there's an intake questionnaire and all of that. And so that's really the easiest way. They can also contact our office. The phone number is 317-247-5040, or the office email as well, which is office@immigrationforcouples.com. So,
Oh, that
yeah.
seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I like to do with some of my guests is offer an opportunity for a shout out for somebody that you think would be a great guest here on this show.
Yeah. I have a very dear friend and mentor. Her name's Marla Mattinson, and she is the owner of a company called the Intimacy Experts, but she's also created this process, an ethical sales process. And she's really revolutionizing the way that sales are happening in our society. I know when people hear the word sales, you automatically kind
Ah,
of think like, ugh, car salesman and feeling pushy. But really, sales is something that we do for people,
mhm.
helping them to figure out if our services are in alignment for them. And she has this very amazing, uplifting process to help business owners specifically reframe how they and their company are handling sales. So Marla is an amazing, amazing human being. So I think
Great.
she'd be great to have on the show.
Thanks. I'll make sure I reach out to her.
Yeah.
And that concludes our show. Thanks to our guest, Megan Pastrana of Immigration for Couples. I hope you've learned something about the journey of couples through the immigration process. I know I have. And this is Dr. Stephen Kirch of Profit Minds. Make sure you catch us again next time on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, more. Of course, I'd appreciate a good review on any of those platforms. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.